Hey y'all, my name is Ann Wyatt. I started my career in workforce development with the state of Kentucky in 2010. That experience ignited a deep passion for manufacturing within me. I started this show hoping to raise more awareness around the bright outlook manufacturing careers have. Join me as I sit down with some of the manufacturing industry's most successful changemakers and learn how they're partnering people with technology. It's time to give people more meaningful work. This is Workforce 4.0. Hey, y'all. Thanks for tuning in today to another episode of Workforce 4.0. Super excited to have Peter Costa on with us today. Peter is the CEO of Baltu Technologies, and that is a program focusing on workforce development, and it's a connected worker tool. We're going to get into that and so much more about Peter. Peter, how are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Ann?
I'm fantastic. I'm so looking forward to this conversation because you have got to have one of the most diverse backgrounds in the industry that I have met so far. And I just love that you have so many interests and you're into so much. And I'm looking forward to learning more about Peter Costa, the person.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Ann. And let's dive in.
Absolutely. Well, Peter, why don't you give us just a general introduction, maybe that for those that are listening today that, they're maybe not familiar with you or Baltu Technologies, what would you have to say to them?
Baltu Technologies, our mission is to accelerate the development of a skilled workforce. We're a social impact company as well. So, we've created a solution that really benefits businesses and people alike. And we're really excited about the work that we're doing and the impact it can have in the future of workforce development and in industries like advanced manufacturing.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's really what piqued my interest to ask you to come on and do Workforce 4.0 is that you are not only providing a solution, but you are so focused on social impact. And that just hit me really hard. I was like, this is awesome because we're not only serving our customers in manufacturing, we're also serving our workforce, which is critical right now.
Yeah.
So I'm super excited to dive into this conversation. But before we get too much into you or the technical stuff or Baltu, I've got to lead with my first question today. And that's gonna be what is your favorite karaoke song or song?
So when you do the when I do karaoke, it's like Queen Bohemian Rhapsody is one of those things that in your mind you think it's going to turn out so much better than it actually does.
Yeah.
And I wish I had a Freddie Mercury voice, but I definitely don't. And so it's one of those things that it's more like a dream than like an actual realization. But I think it turns into great entertainment, that's for sure. So I'd
Absolutely.
say that's one of the ones I probably like to do the most.
Awesome. Yeah, Queen Bohemian Rhapsody is very popular on this show. We've had that a few times, that answer. So I love that. But you're not playing. Like, here's the thing, you're not playing with all this karaoke because you are an actual musician. In fact, you studied music at the University of Arizona and you were in a band, is what I'm told, an emo band, which punk emo band, which speaks, I mean, I was an emo girl back in the day, Peter. I was an
Oh
emo
yeah?
girl.
Do you have the straighten the hair in the morning and have the eyeshadow and
I had gauged
everything? Yeah.
ears,
And the gauge ears? Oh yeah, yeah. Those were
black nail polish.
oh wow. Yeah, like
Do you
the
remember?
MySpace selfie from like up above and okay.
Oh, absolutely. Do you remember the monkey ball necklaces?
Oh yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Rocked one of those for years.
Okay, of course. Of course. That
So,
was just the day and age. So yeah, so like really my background was always in music. And so I studied at ASU at Arizona State University and got a degree in music and physics, but in high school I wasn't interested in like going to college or any of that stuff. I was like after school it was like let's go and practice and like prepare for the show. And so I was always like we were always practicing and writing new music, and that was when I realized I didn't even realize it then, but I was looking back, I was an entrepreneur. So we were setting up like big festivals and tours in the state, just going to like different areas in Arizona. And then we saved up to record an album. And the album, like right when we graduated, it got kind of leaked out. This was back in mp3.com. So
oh
like
yeah.
MySpace wasn't even around yet, I don't think. And so it went viral on mp3.com. And the next day we had like all these major record labels reaching out to us. And so I basically was like, all right, let's do this. And so we ended up, doing the whole touring, recording a few albums. I eventually left the band. It wasn't like in line with, it was a little crazy. And like the folks on, like we were on like Warped Tour and all these big tours, and they would say, "Oh, those guys are crazy." Like, so that kind of gives you an idea, which that's not like totally my vibe, but it was awesome. As like somebody just coming out of high school, I got to have a like, tour like all around the country, got to go to different parts of the world, and it was awesome. And it was just the first time I saw something that like you were able to create something from nothing and then like turn it into something that people all over the world knew about. And it was a great experience. And so that was my music experience. And then after that, I was doing music for video games and like different music production. I was always teaching, always kind of been an educator at the heart of it. But that's kind of what led me into some of the stuff I'm doing now. But yes, I'm more like the music teacher for my kids now. So
That's still awesome. I mean, and I love that you said about taking something, making something from nothing. I feel like that's pretty representative of the manufacturing industry, right? I mean, you're
yeah,
taking
right.
like raw product and you're making something,
I love that. I've
raw
never heard it
materials.
from that perspective. I've heard it from like an entrepreneurship perspective, but yeah, you got this vision. How do I make it into an actual physical good? So I love that.
Yeah, that's really a cool way to look at it. So, yeah, for sure. Um, well, speaking of manufacturing, you're now the CEO of Baltu Technologies. And that is a really unique name to me. I think that's really cool. So I wanted to take this opportunity and ask you what Baltu means and kind of a little bit more about how you came up with that name and maybe your origin story, some would say.
Okay. Yeah. So it was very intentional. Like when we first started the company, it was really, we didn't realize we were going to be in the workforce space. It was more the experience I had working with virtual reality and some of these other different technologies was like the first iteration of our company. And so Baltu is an old Sumerian word. We found it means people. And it really is like people technology. So people is at the core of what we try to do as a company. And so that's still like is ingrained in the DNA of the company. It's around how do we find solutions that the market needs, both for businesses and for people. And so that's what we're trying to do every day is solve these problems that can help people on both sides.
Yeah, that's really impactful. So Baltu translates to people. Is
That's,
that?
I mean, we looked it up and that's supposedly what it means. I don't think, I don't know Sumerian, so, but that's what it says. So, yep.
That's awesome. I love that. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely representative with what you all do, being a connected worker tool and then also giving back to local educational institutions and things like that with on the job training. We'll touch a little bit more in depth on that as we go. But I just think that's so important, right? The concept of people behind the workforce.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's what makes everything go. It's people at the end of the day, and people are incredible. When you can learn how to leverage their talents and skills and abilities and give them that autonomy and that pathway to it does remarkable things. But that's a challenge. It's a hard thing to do, especially in something where like in manufacturing where you've kind of established this system, this machine
Mhm.
that you don't want to touch it. You don't want to mess you don't like on the software side, it's like you don't touch the code. Don't do anything. Don't update the engine. And so it's a big challenge on how do you continue to function and have that efficiency, but how do you bring more people into that? So
Yeah, that is a huge challenge with manufacturing, I think, sometimes, right? We've got institutions built on process,
yeah.
but as we're moving forward and we're seeing the adoption of more technology, it's changing the process, and it's affecting the way people work and operators, your front line, everyone.
Yeah.
And what do you think are some of those challenges that you see manufacturing when it comes to kind of changing the status quo of being so stuck in the process and trying to mitigate that and move forward to be more focused on people?
Yeah. Well, so here in Phoenix, we're big in semiconductors out here. So the type of automated environments that we're seeing are, highly automated, where people aren't touching anything. You're working with $300 million semiconductor tools, is what they call them, pieces of equipment that make these computer chips or different microelectronics. And so from like a process standpoint, the process is all done by the machines. And the skill that the people need to have is around that intervention. So do you have a technician that has the problem solving skills that can come in and make sure that you're not losing $250,000 in material every hour, or $1 million in in equipment that could break? And so from a technician standpoint, I think it's really around, like, there can be some process that is related to that, but it really is around a lot of problem solving skills. And do people have those skill sets of to know how to start in to do a diagnostic on a machine, to troubleshoot that, to not rely on somebody else to come in and do that for them. And as
Mhm.
we enter this world of industry 4.0, where you're going to see more and more of this advanced technology in our manufacturing or industrial environments, you're going to need more and more people that know how to to intervene, and how to solve those different problems. And so that's the core of what we're doing at Baltu, is how are you empowering that next generation workforce with the skills that they need. So that's one of the things that I guess I look at from my perspective and experience in the advanced manufacturing world.
I love that. I mean, so impactful, right? I mean, you think about whereas before we didn't have to have that level of critical thinking really in
Hmm.
manufacturing, but now we have to identify things and mitigate that. We have to take action on the things that we have identified,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yeah. Hmm.
So it's the same. It's definitely it's a different process. There's still a process, but it's a different process.
Yeah, definitely. And the correlation I always look to is, look at computers that were only affordable to large enterprises during the 80s, and then during the 90s we kind of finally got to that personal computer where it entered the office, it entered into the entire social fabric of our daily lives, and now you have this new technology that people can utilize, and it creates these great efficiencies. But you need a whole new generation of people that need to know how to use these things. And that's actually what I grew up doing. My dad was an electrical engineer. He worked on supercomputers.
That's
And
cool.
so I had a computer. I was like playing on the computer when I was like 3 years old, which back in the
Nice.
80s was,
That's
not
like a big
not everybody.
deal.
Yeah, it was a big deal. And so when I was like 10 or 11, he would have his friends that had their small businesses saying, "Hey, I'm trying to get how do I get this printer to work? How do I get onto the internet? How do I send an email?" So he didn't have time to help them. So he'd send me, and that was like my summer job or after school job. Is I was like 10 or 11, I'd help them set up their computer network. And so I look back at that experience and I think, okay, there was this whole new wave of technology that created all these efficiencies and affordances, but you needed people to have the skills to be able to work with them and utilize them appropriately. And I look at that as with advanced manufacturing. You have these shops or these giant factories that are becoming fully automated. You even have these small, 10-person shops that are using a lot of automation and robotics. And so how do you transition that workforce from these skills that were more legacy skills? So a lot of just like basic electrical, mechanical systems, pneumatic systems, and now they have to learn how to interface with a computer. They have to know how
Right.
to, like, have this sensor talk to another sensor. So they're like IT technicians as well. And the big challenge that I see, and this is just from firsthand, is there's a lot of people that would love to do those jobs that have the skill set. But right now, the pathway is, well, go to college and get a
Mm.
degree, and then you can come back and start doing it. So the big challenge I see going back in like that 90s space is that you had a lot of like office folks that maybe a college education was something that was a little more accessible to them. But this day and age, the demographic of people that are in that are, a lot of them identify as hands-on learners. I have so many people saying, college isn't for me. I'm not a college learner. I can't sit down and read a textbook and like take a test. I need something more hands-on. And so that's the reason why a lot of people aren't going to the colleges, is just because, it's not their learning style. And then in addition to that, it's, I'm working two jobs. I'm
I
living
hear
in a
that a
rural
lot.
area. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I got kids. I gotta go home at three
Yeah.
o'clock and pick up my kids from school. And then just that investment that it takes sometimes in college. And so that's where those are like the big problems that we're addressing. And this is why we consider ourselves a like a social impact company, because we're solving the challenges that people face in accessing training, but we're also solving the challenges that businesses face in trying to develop a more skilled workforce.
Yeah. I mean, so much of what you said just hits just I mean, this is exactly the same challenges that I hear over and over from all different directions. I mean, everyone I think is kind of on that consensus of, we've got to figure out how to upskill people. We have to meet them where they are and we have to be more flexible kind of as an industry, right? In order to do that.
Hmm.
I've got to give you such props because you've got to be a brilliant mind, Peter. And I say that
Thank you.
because you are here in manufacturing, but you chose the college route. And not only did you major in music, but you also majored in physics. That's that's crazy. Like that's really cool that we're having this conversation. I'm talking to a person
Well,
that majored in physics, but can you tell us a little bit more about that segue? Like how did Peter go into college, major in physics, and then come out of college with a degree and then get into manufacturing?
I'll preface this with, so thank you for the kind words, but I'm not like the bright classroom person when it comes to like getting that physics degree was like it was like climbing up a cliff. It was incredibly challenging. I realized near the end of it that I wasn't a physicist. It's like you hear the story about Jeff Bezos, and he was like in one of his physics classes, and he like he just he wasn't a natural like some of his contemporaries were.
Yeah.
But what I learned through my college experiences is, in the classes I was attending, many of the professors were there to do research. They weren't there to actually teach. And so there wasn't really engagement. It didn't seem like there was like a lot of interest. And then there was just a language barrier with some of them. Unfortunately, they didn't really proficient in English. And so it was just, I had a really hard time understanding really what they were trying to teach. And so what I found myself doing was going to the library instead of going to class and watching. I think MIT had just released a series of like the different physics topics I was covering, and I was just going
Huh.
and watching the YouTube videos online and then doing my homework and then doing practice problems and trying to like get through it. And what I realized through all that experience is that, wow, like I don't like the person teaching it is sometimes providing value, but it's hit or miss. The thing that I found really effective was when I could have one-on-one office hours where I could sit down with these professors and ask them the specific questions that were blocking me or keeping me from understanding a concept. It was group work, because the group work was me asking questions like, hey, I don't get this thing. Why is this thing? It had to be, that learning experience had to be interactive. And then during that time, I was like a research assistant in one of the biophysics labs. And so we were working with some of like the more high caliber tools that they had. And that doing that was helping connect what I was learning in the classroom with what I was doing in a lab environment. And so fast forward, I'm just taking that experience from from like my physics and the music days and saying, well, how can we optimize learning for somebody that can't sit in a classroom all the time or is that needs to learn the skill on the job? And so taking those principles and really applying them in like a more formalized format to help accelerate that learning experience. And so the model that we're replicating, and actually this was just this, I didn't know what this thing was. It was kind of like in my head. I was like, it's kind of like there's a lot of on the job training, there's some mentorship, there's
Yeah.
classroom learning,
Like
and
it's not just one thing. So
yeah.
like
Well, Jim Mayer, he if
I
you know
love Jim
Jim,
Mayer. I
and
love Jim Mayer.
yeah, he's here in Phoenix, and we were talking a few months ago, and he's like, you know what you're doing? It's like the 70-20-10 model, and I was like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. It just clicked, and I was like, oh, this is what I've been trying to strive to over, like building a learning experience over these past few years, and I think we all resonate with that. We all feel like we just need to touch it. We need to explore. We need to you know, kind of get our hands dirty. But how do you do that in an environment where, when there's like millions of dollars of production equipment in front of you? So,
Right. Yeah.
uh,
That
there are
was
different challenges.
Yeah, that was always a big thing with recruiting. And so, when you go back and you ask, why does someone have to have this specific skill set? When you're recruiting them, or why does experience matter so much?
Mhm.
It's a safety thing, and it's a capital investment thing.
Yeah,
If you've got somebody that is fresh, that has never stepped foot in a manufacturing facility, it's like a carnival in there.
yeah,
There are things going at, just incredible speed.
yep,
They're big things. They're big
yep,
things moving at incredible speed. And there is no like, they have sensors on them,
hmm,
but there's no like, there's a stop button, but there's
yep,
no like,
yeah,
emergency brake. If
yeah,
you walk in front of it,
yep,
it's not little, it's going to hurt you. Right.
yeah. And that's why you
That
need that
and
expert by your side to, like help guide you. And that's where I think that mentorship thing comes in. I think the challenge I see is a lot of people that are assigned to be trainers or mentors aren't. It's just kind of like, hey, this is what you're doing today,
Yep.
and they don't have the guide to do that. And so that's part of what we do in our upskill platform is we provide those hands-on learning models for the trainers. So what we leverage on our upskill platform is it's micro learning combined with on the job training, and it all leads to industry recognized credentials. So that's
Nice.
like kind of like the core concept. But for example, if somebody just got done doing a micro lesson on lockout tagout, it's still an abstract concept in their head. Like they have no idea. Like there's these tags that blocks. I can see a little bit
Yeah.
why this is
Yeah.
important, but it's not until you actually go into the environment and see for themselves. And so what we do is then provide that hands-on guide to the trainer where it's like, all right, we're going to explore first. So can you see where the lockout tagout station is? Can you see where the where would you collect that items? And then it will guide them through, okay, let's go ahead and do a formal lockout. Let's do the tag out. And now somebody can start understanding more of that process. And that doesn't take a lot of time. It's just, I think from the trainer side, like
You
people are just
just
kind of
do
on the
it.
fly. Yeah.
Yeah, you just do it every day, and it just becomes like second nature, and we're not doing a good job of really realizing and filling in that, or we get frustrated with
Yeah.
especially the younger generations that come in and they're like, "Well, why is this thing doing this and why are we doing that and what do you mean? What does lockout tagout mean?"
Yeah.
They don't know, and we have to operate on the principle that they don't know.
Yeah. And that's a
Yeah.
hard expectation to communicate to both the individual being trained and the trainer lots of times, unless it is like somebody that's experienced and enjoys training. But I think a lot of people kind of get thrown into that position and they're just kind of like, you don't know what that means? Like, that's what happens with everybody. Like, I don't know, like, why did you like mess with the thermostat? And they're like, what's a thermostat?
Oh, yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and
I've
so,
seen that a few times.
yeah. Why is the thermostat at 50? It's creating that environment where people can explore, And that's that learning process. It's exploring. It's then like connecting these ideas to these concepts that people learn to real world things. And then you can start giving them that autonomy to say, okay, now how do we introduce like little problems where you can start solving that? And
Yeah.
we're talking about going back to that concept of problem solving. I think that is where I see people having having a having a clear pathway to what their purpose is at work. And so kind of getting it to the high level, like, we talked about the challenges that people have in accessing training. Like, hey, I'm facing all these different barriers to access training. But I think the other side too is in most industries today, we kind of post a job and we say, here's the
Mm.
job. It's,
Uh-huh.
18 bucks an hour
Uh-huh.
and this is what you're doing. And people are wondering why aren't anybody coming to this position? Well, like it's 18 bucks an hour,
It
but
Have you read some
beyond
of these job descriptions?
that, yes.
Have you? Because I wanted to do, I'm not gonna lie. There was a point, and I'm glad that you know Jim, because I wish Jim were here. He would appreciate this. But I mean, there was a point that I thought about doing just a whole like TikTok series or something on like job description reviews, like bad job description reviews. Because I mean,
Mhm.
it's a bunch of really pretty words. It's a bunch of really pretty words, but here's the problem is that if you're reading it and you get through it and you still don't know what it is, like what the job description is,
Yeah.
that's a that's a problem, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and most people are going to look at that, and the moment they see something they don't recognize, they're going to go pass. I don't know what this is, and because
Exactly.
they're not looking at it as an opportunity. That's the first thing, and
Well,
so you're trying to
it's like
find.
I don't know what this is, so I mean this obviously doesn't apply to me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so they're going to move on, and this is, I mean, we're experiencing the skills gap like firsthand now.
Mhm.
And a few months ago, I was talking with somebody, and they have a bunch of CNC machines that they're trying to fill, and I'm like, so what are you doing to bring your like entry level workforce to be these CNC operators? And are you willing to invest in like creating this pathway to become like a CNC operator within your company? And they're like, No, no. We hired a few companies to go find people to fill these positions, and we're asking like, have you had success? And it's like, no. And they're like, we're looking for people with 5 to 10 years experience, and maybe they'll get lucky, but like the
Every
skills
once
gap
in a
that we're
while they get
talking
lucky.
about, yeah, like, but not everybody does. And so this is the thing that we've been talking about for the last 10 years in this industry is that there's more and more people retiring, more and more people leaving the workforce, less people coming in. And so it's creating this labor pool that's much smaller. And so
Mhm.
what's going to happen is, people are going to start fighting for these people, and it's
We've
going to
Yeah. I mean, we're there.
it's yeah,
That's I
we're
mean, we're already
yeah.
there. We have been there since about 2016,
Yeah. And
honestly.
it's not gonna get any better either. For example, yeah, you can put effort in trying to fill that position by recruiting, but you should also create a backup plan, like an alternative. How are we getting people upskilled and trained for these positions? And that's where I see the big opportunity for both employers and individuals. So I think it's something like if people see a job ad that offers on the job training, free on the job training, that job position will have about 33% more applicants to it, just because you're saying, we'll train you. If you're using words like, we're going to provide you a career opportunity where you're going to grow within the company,
Uh-huh.
we're going, you're going to start at maybe this like starting level wage, but we're going to invest in your training, we're going to give you a pathway to get to, you know 30 bucks an hour within the next 3 to 5 years. People want that. I think a lot of that's the world we live in, is people are tired of showing up in this like a gig economy, and the gig economy isn't really working for them. And so people want these pathways, but the challenge is, okay, well, what's that path? And this is where it's like you're asking certain people to go do the college route, and they're like, hey, I just can't do that. I think college works for a certain number of people. I'm not dissing the colleges at all because they're phenomenal. I think there just needs to be alternative pathways to get to that higher position. And that's, to me, what the market is demanding, the market of people, what the labor market is demanding. Like, hey, I want to get there, but show me a different way.
Yeah, as a millennial, I think we're both millennials. But, as a millennial, I mean, I look at Gen Z and then I look up to senior level management. I'm looking back down at Gen Z and I'm looking like, well, I mean, we tried to warn you.
Yeah.
This is the demand.
Well, if like manufacturing a product, like you are building a product based on market demand. And so it's not your it's not the market's fault if your product doesn't fit their needs. And so you have to adapt your product to whatever the market's needed.
Yep.
And from a HR labor perspective, it's the same way.
It's
We're
exactly the
offering
same way.
so we have to if it's not working right now, then we got to try something new because that's the thing I think naturally all of us get frustrated about that. It's like, we got kids and so you're trying to
Oh
ask
yeah.
your kid to do something and they're not doing it that way and we get frustrated with them, we yell at them and then we realize maybe there's a better way I can communicate this. And when you try like the more like the other approach, oh, okay, my kid just ended up doing their chores because I tried a different way to incentivize them or to get them to
Yeah.
do what I wanted to do. And from a hiring standpoint, we can't get frustrated when we don't get the results that are based on what we think people want. We have to ask the market, what do you want?
Preach.
Yeah. So, and
Yeah.
this, this is your space. So, I mean,
I get frustrated because it seems to me like the answer is really obvious. I mean, it's my space. I mean, I could have just be as bad as the trainers that are like, oh, this is pretty obvious, right? But I think we've done a really good job of communicating this and sharing these kinds of experiences.
yeah,
And I
it,
think that at some point we're going to have to adapt in some
yeah.
way.
I mean, that is the process. That's we have to accept that. It's always going to be changing. And the same way when we looked at that computer adoption in the 90s, the companies that weren't willing to get connected to the internet, start using computers, they lost out on all of those efficiencies. And I imagine it was hard to see it in the moment that that's why their businesses were struggling. But in hindsight, it was probably a lot easier to say, oh, yeah, we weren't using this. And so our competitors were out competing us because we weren't using new technology. I saw it in the music world. It went from recording studios were all analog tape, and then it was
Uh-huh.
going to Pro Tools. And you had these absolutists that were like, "No, I'm never going to bring a computer in here." And there's some of those folks that survived, but most people that survived that recording studio evolution were the ones that started bringing in Pro Tools. They were the ones that started using both, and they were able to survive. And it's not saying that I still know certain recording studios that only use analog tape, but there's only a handful of them now,
Yeah.
not, hundreds like there used to be. And so looking at AI tools, robotics and automation tools, all of these efficiencies, how are you developing your workforce? These are just different types of problems. And if you're not on top of them, your business is going to start struggling and you won't realize why until much later on if you do some retrospective on it.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And not only that, I mean, people are a finite resource. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? I
Totally.
mean, not entirely, right? Because we are essentially always living and always dying, right? I mean,
Hmm.
we're going to have, generations oncoming behind us, right? But your labor market scope of where you can really, you know, target employees is
Yeah.
finite.
Yeah. Well,
And
now go ahead. Keep going. Sorry.
oh, I was just gonna say, and I mean, it's not just our industry out there
Hmm.
that's and that's facing the same crunch.
Yeah.
There's many industries. Tech is another tech's a huge industry, right? Healthcare, um, supply chain logistics,
Yeah.
services, hospitality, all of these are in the same talent crunch that we are in with a very finite resource, which is labor.
Hmm.
So, what can we do and be proactive, knowing that going in and understanding that to navigate around that? And I mean, we've got to start winning people over. We've got to
Hmm.
adopt that mentality.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
totally. So my experience, so once again, semiconductor, there's a lot of semiconductor jobs out here in Phoenix. We have Intel as their big fab, and they're building another fab here. And then TSMC, it's a $40 billion project. I think in total there's like 70 or $80 billion of semiconductor work that's being built out here.
That's
So
amazing.
it is. But these companies are struggling to find skilled workers as well. And we were actually doing the VR stuff. We were hired by the community colleges and by a local nonprofit called 𝗧𝗵𝗶𝘀 to build a VR experience that showed what it was like to actually be inside of these factories.
Tell me about that. Tell me more about that. I wanna hear all about that.
Cool. So the first thing that we did was let's get a real-time perspective of what people think of this word semiconductor manufacturing. And then we also did aerospace manufacturing. So there was like a Apache helicopter plant here that we were building the VR experience for. And we'd ask all these, we went to like Comic-Con, we went to the high schools,
Nice.
and we were asking, hey, when I say the word semiconductor manufacturing, what comes to your mind? And people would say, well, I kind of vision this like warehouse, and it's like people are stamping these circuit boards, and it's kind of hot and dirty, and I'm just like, you have no idea. And so then we put them in the VR experience, and it's like a video game. So they're inside of the clean room, inside of the fab. And if you've never seen these fabs before, you have like the overhead robots that are coming down, picking up these like the cases of wafers,
That's
bringing it
cool.
up, and then transporting them to other areas of the factory. And everything is automated. And so when these
Mhm.
kids go in there, and it's a clean room, so it looks like that kind of like white
It's, like,
matrix room.
spotless. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And so when kids see it, they're like, "Holy cow, this looks amazing. This looks like Star Wars. I could totally see myself doing that." So the disconnect was this this word that we use, which I think semiconductor just is not a good word. So it's chips, computer chips, like in your
Right.
in your iPhone. And then the other word is manufacturing, and that automatically paints a picture for the kids and also for the parents. And so I stopped using the word manufacturing when I was trying to describe this to people. I was saying, what do you think of a job where you would actually be making computer chips? And it totally paints a different picture for both the student and for the parents, because maybe we got this kid excited about going into VR and seeing, hey, I could be a semiconductor manufacturing technician. And then they're all excited. They go back to their parents, and they're like, "I want to work in semiconductor manufacturing." And so then their parents hear
Oh,
manufacturing,
yeah. They're
and
like,
they
"What?"
say, "No, you're not working in manufacturing." And so what the parents don't know is like, "Hey, I can have a high school degree, no college. I can start at 50, 60K a year. Most of these technicians in these fabs are making over 100K a year, no college degree. Some are engineers without an engineering degree." And so this is like the standard of high quality jobs. But their parents don't know that. The students don't know that. So there's this whole education thing around changing this paradigm. And so using tools like VR or just even videos or one-on-one conversations with experts in those spaces they provide a totally different perspective. And same thing when I show videos of an advanced manufacturing facility and like seeing all these robots that are automated, and like students or like younger kids are like, "Holy cow, that's awesome." And so I'm like, "What
They get
excites
all
you about
excited.
this?" They
Robots.
do. Yeah, robots. And
Yes.
so as a workforce development tool, I tell companies like if you're not using robotics, automation, new technology, you are missing out on a workforce development opportunity. Because the moment people walk in and see your facility and they're like, "Wow, there's robots here," and you tell them, "Yeah, you're going to work with that robot," they're like, "Hell yeah, I want to work here."
Yeah.
And we're going to train you. We'll train you. You don't even have to go to college. We'll provide the on the job training for you. That's like mind blowing. So that to me is that's like the day and day of what I'm doing to help gain awareness around these new jobs. And it's, it's an exciting time that we're in, especially now with AI. There's going to be more and more technology that's going to be capable of incredible things, and more smaller companies that are going to be using this technology to do all of their processes.
I love this so much. And you know what I just realized in this conversation? I think we've kind of come full circle here because, we were talking about like how you were a degree physicist and how you were passing your physics classes. And I think, you've kind of taken some of those same techniques that you applied in your college experience and created an entire connected worker training platform on it. Do you think that had some inspiration there? Your experience with YouTube and kind of self-teaching yourself through that when you created Baltu? Like, do you think there's a connection there?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just trying to identify with, there's two customers in this. One is the employer and the other is the employee. And so, empathizing with your customer is very important when building a business. And so when I talk with folks around the challenges they face, I'm like, yeah, I get you. Like, I understand. And so what would I do different? And so that's part of you know, I guess has been very influential. But it's
The
also,
concept of, yeah, like YouTube videos and then like let's create training with videos.
yeah,
I
yeah,
love that.
yeah. Well, I think having kids too, you kind of realize their
Oh
attention
yeah.
span and their
Oh yeah.
learning, and you see what works good for them. So this is why we've taken this micro learning approach. And so we use a certification that some of your audience probably is familiar with. It's SACA, the Smart Automation Certification Alliance. And so we started initially trying to do this longer course experience. And we had some success stories, but we saw that there were certain people that were getting stuck. So we asked them, why are you getting stuck? Why is this like a challenge for you? We just learned that it was like a lot of information being presented too much
Mhm.
at a time. And so they provided us really valuable insight. And so this is where we started breaking down all of these topics into what we now call microlearning. So microlearning is basically taking these like complex topics and breaking them down into bite-size learning lessons of about 5 to 20 minutes. We focus on assessment, on mastery, making sure that just people understand the concepts. It's not like, oh, you got an 80% on your quiz. All right, move on. It's like, no, you got to keep doing this quiz until you get 100%. But we're going to give you time to do it and
Mhm.
keep rereading the material. And then once you get to the next phase, you're going to keep doing that again. And then we integrate that hands-on learning in the middle of that to help increase the learning efficiency of that. So when people can see the equipment and when people can start applying these abstract concepts that are just like exist on a screen or exist in a book, now they can see how they are in real life. Now you have something that is much more effective when it comes to learning, retention, and application. And then you can start bringing them to that next level of, okay, let's do
Like the
problem
critical
solving.
thinking. Yep.
Exactly. Yep.
Yep. Absolutely. I love this. I love that so much, Peter. And I really appreciate this conversation so much. I mean, this has been a lot of fun for me. So I hope you've also enjoyed it. But I've got one more
Yeah.
question to round up our conversation for the
Okay.
day. And that is a very important question of if we've got listeners in the audience today that would love to reach out to you, how do you suggest they do that? What's the best contact method for you?
Well, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. So it's Peter Costa, Costa, and Baltu Technologies. Baltu is Baltu. And then you can check out our website, baltutech.com. And I'm not really that active on Twitter, but if I end up being active on Twitter, it'd be at PD Costa. So that's
Awesome.
where you find me.
Awesome, Peter. Well, I really appreciate this conversation. I think we've learned so much today, and hopefully, my audience has learned a lot as well. And it's been very impactful.
Thank you. Thanks, Ann. And I appreciate the work that you're doing. I think we're both looking at the same thing, and I would just love, additional perspectives and feedbacks from your audience as well. Are there additional challenges that they see? This is something kind of that's still in its early stages, and so we're always looking to improve and, kind of like process improvement. So how are we doing something that's
Absolutely.
helping to impact the industry even more?
Yeah. So you heard it, folks. Hit him up.
Thanks, Ann.
All right. Thank you, Peter.